open the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee, and before we go into our full public meeting, we need a little bit of time in Executive Committee. First we need a roll call.
Thank you, yes. Good morning, everyone. Trustee Kane.
Here.
And Trustee Donnelly. I don't see him. Trustee Irwin.
Here.
Trustee Gardner.
Here.
Trustee Cates.
Here.
Trustee McMahon.
Here.
Trustee Martin.
Here.
Trustee Riley.
Here.
Trustee Rotundo.
Here.
We're all set.
Thank you. And could I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Oh, and I need to explain why. I haven't had enough coffee yet. Under the provisions of 1 MRSA Section 4056A to discuss the evaluation of personnel and the consideration and discussion of appointments, evaluations, employment, and duties, and 1 MRSA Section 4056C to discuss the conditions, acquisition, or disposition of real property or economic development if premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive or bargaining position of UMS. It's been moved by Peggy. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Kane. Ellen's turn.
Trustee Kane.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee Gardner.
Yes.
Trustee Cates.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Martin.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Ellen, are we ready? Great. Good morning, and apologies that we're a bit late, but we're reconvening the FFT committee. I remind everybody to keep their mics muted while we proceed so that we can hear everybody. We recognize we're behind time. We want to give full discussion to each of the items before us, but ask presenters to be as precise as you can be. With that, let me turn to tab 1, the first item on our agenda, which is the updated proposed university and system office operating budget and student charges. It's our second reading for a motion later once we have our discussion. And I will turn to Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So certainly excited to be here to present the operating budget for the committee's final approval. As I always do when we get to this phase of the process, I want to thank the presidents, the CBOs, the campus communities for all of the engagement and all of the great comments and suggestions that go along through the budget process. I truly believe we always end up with a better document at the end after we've gone through this process. And so I want to thank everyone for that. I want to thank Miriam and Angela and others on my team who help us get here as well. I did want to, just before I jump into the presentation, I did want to do, just a special thanks to Chip Gavin. I think this is Chip's last, I know this is Chip's last FFT meeting with us. I've had a chance to work with Chip going back to our days in state government. I know a lot of the folks on the call have been with Chip since then as well. Just an outstanding employee. He gives 110% literally every single day that he's with us, and on top of that is just an even better person. So absolutely grateful to have this time with Chip, and certainly wish him best as he moves forward as well. So let me jump right. Yes, exactly. Let me jump right into the presentation. So again, this is our, we've been through this presentation. Several of you have been through this presentation at least 3 times now. So I will go through the full slide deck, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to highlight key points along the way. I'll typically move past historical information and make sure that we leave time in the agenda for any questions on either of the points that I raise or other questions. Again, the budget is a year-long process. It started back at the system level in the summer with the CBOs and others, really developing those top-level assumptions that we include in the budget, things like our appropriation and tuition assumptions, what our benefit rate is going to be, and a number of other initiatives. We do that work as a group, and then we turn that over to the campuses for this campus budget development phase that you see right in the middle of the chart here. That involves lots of conversations with cabinets and campus communities. By the time we get around to January, we start some initial conversations with system and board leadership, a full day of walking through what is our first draft of those budgets. And then we start working with this committee always in this March timeframe. So in March, we had a first reading of the bill. Over the last couple of years, we've added a work session, a committee work session into the April timeline, and then this final meeting here where we look for a vote, and then ultimately we'll bring it to trustees later in the year. It is nice to be back on a schedule. The last couple of years, our budget schedule has been blown up. Approval is sometimes come in late June, sometimes even after the fiscal year. So I'm certainly grateful to be back there. Again, just hitting a few key points. Occupancy rates continue to be a challenge. They're well below capacity at some of our campuses. And again, would note that, this will be the first budget in a couple of years where we don't have the COVID budget relief funds. Most of those were used in 2021 and 22. Incredibly grateful for those dollars. And hopefully as we bounce back over the next couple of years, we won't need those. Enrollment, again, FY23 budgeted credit hours are up 1.1%, are 1.1% below the FY22 budget, but are up slightly over FY22 actuals. And we are grateful for the ongoing appropriation increase that was included in the budget, 6.1 million, as well as an additional one-time appropriation of nearly 8 million, contingent on us keeping undergraduate in-state tuition flat in this budget, which we've done. And would note, again, unrestricted capital investments in this budget are up a little over 10%, and excited to see that. This is the budget summary document. We've been through this a couple of times. Key points that I'll emphasize: you see the proposed budget stabilization fund transfers in this budget, roughly 6.5 million in 2023. What you see off into the far right column is a bunch of zeros. That's what we want to see. So after transfers, all of the campuses are in a balanced situation. So I mentioned the 6.5 million in proposed budget stabilization transfers. You can see those right in the middle of this column. Ironically, we were also looking for 6.5 million worth of transfers in 2022. So while this is a 2023 budget as part of the approval motion, we are looking for, highlighting and looking for your approval for increasing the amount of the 2022 transfers at Farmington, adding one at Presque Isle, and then a slight decrease in the transfer proposed at Maine Law. It does bring the projected balance in the budget stabilization fund prior to any investment gains or losses to about 10.7 million. We've talked about the challenges of those investment gains, and that will certainly impact that balance, but more on that in the full May meeting. Again, I'll skip mostly the historical ones. What I would note here, because I do think it is a good story, if you focus on 2016 up to 2023, you see a $40 million increase in state appropriation over an 8-year window. That's the same window where lots of colleges and universities across the country were seeing deep cuts. And so we're very appreciative of the bipartisan support that we've received over the last several years, and certainly a special thanks to Sam Warren for the great work that she does in Augusta on a regular basis. We have, over the last several years, tracked appropriation to CPI to give us a full understanding of what kind of buying power we've been losing as we stayed flat. Again, that's since 2016, we've seen a sharp increase. And so, again, really appreciate that. Looking at enrollment details, and again, these are the summary slides. In the appendix, you have access to these same slides by individual campus. So again, I've noted the modest increase over last year's actuals. We'll note out-of-state credit hours are about 33% of our total credit hours. That's certainly a sharp increase since we've seen, even since 2020, if you go back further, the increase is larger, driven by certainly large in-state, out-of-state classes at the University of Maine, but also the growth in academic partnership programs has increased that. You can see that in the bottom right in this slide. Residence hall occupancy continues to be a challenge at some of our campuses. We are seeing a bounce back on roughly half of our campus, and you can see that in the individual details. Normal and COVID occupancy rates are up from 2022 to 2023, so we're happy to see that. But again, we do have individual challenges at the campuses. Those of you that have participated in those conversations, there's a lot of exciting things going on that the campuses are doing to address that. You heard about those in the individual presentations, and so we continue to be hopeful that those occupancy rates will continue to climb up as we move, hopefully, past COVID. The highlight of this chart, probably the highlight of our presentation, is the in-state undergraduate flat rates for 2023. You do see modest increases in out-of-state rates, below 3.1% on the undergraduate side, modest increases as well over on the out-of-state side. We have included this chart in our presentation for a number of years. really look at our tuition rates adjusted for inflation, how those compare to national levels. If you've been with us for a while, it's not unusual to see this chart where we were on the negative side for a number of years. Even now, rates still hovering at just 2% increase over a 5-year period adjusted for inflation. So have continued to try to minimize any increases in tuition. You can see that here as well. In-state tuition as a percentage of Maine per capita income since 2013, that has continued to go down at a sharp rate, either by a combination of frozen in-state rates, which we do about half the time, and then even when we've had increases, those have generally been tied to CPI numbers, so at or below 3% in most years. Funding depreciation has obviously been a focus of this committee, going back to certainly conversations that we had at the system level back in 2010 when we set some initial targets. So what I'll note here, just a couple of highlights. Total investment, as I mentioned early on, is up about 10.3%. E&G and auxiliary budgeted capital investment up about 4.2 million, funded 75% of our total depreciation expenses in this budget. That is up about 6% over 2022 budgets. Lots of details on the next several slides. You're going to hear about that a little bit from Nate coming up after this. And so I won't spend a lot of time focusing on this, just again pointing out that if you're looking for detail, if you want to understand the 2.311 million from the University of Maine in facilities and infrastructure, you want to understand what projects those are. We do have that data here. You can they're color coded, so you can add up all the green ones and you'll get to the same number, and the same information again by campus included as part of your materials. Let me move into my last handful of slides. So proposed operating budget, it is included here by E&G as well as auxiliary. I'll touch on the combined piece just briefly. Again, overall, move the faces here so I can see this. Again, overall, tuition and fee revenue up by about 7.7 million, 2.3%. Dining and residence hall revenue, you can see here beginning to bounce back. And when you look at these summaries of revenue and expenses, in some cases, there's real growth going on here. So if you look at the personnel line, you see about a $16 million increase net of some attrition charges. That is specifically related to collective bargaining agreements. We've talked a bit about, especially at the April session, on fuel and electricity increases. Some of these increases, and this is especially true when you look at the individual campus numbers, are really a reflection of us just returning back to kind of pre-COVID levels of spending or on our way back. And so travel is a perfect example. There are other expenses and transfers, supplies and services where we're starting to ramp things up. So I think dining is another one. If you look at where we were last year, we've grown, especially compared to 2 years ago. So some of these numbers are just a reflection of us starting to bounce back. Down at the bottom of the page, you'll see the $6.5 million transfer from reserves. That was the same number that you saw back on the charts at the beginning of the presentation. Let me go back one. So quasi-independent state entities, budget requirements. So again, we've talked about this before as part of our Chapter 616 and some issues that occurred with some state agencies where we're required to regularly report on travels, meals, entertainment, donations, and sponsorship. And this is part of that. We do that as part of the budget process. And then when we do our 3 times a year budget forecasts, we also provide updates to the committee at that point. So let me just get into the last piece of my presentation. I did want to focus a little bit on governance and university services. We've spent, I talked about this again in March, and just want to make sure I go through this one more time. So the system office is, as a lot of folks have talked about it, comprised of 3 units. Governance on one side, university services, both allocated and unallocated, are additional parts. So for governance, for 2023, roughly a $6.7 million operation funding, 25 positions. Without any context, and you're just looking at this slide, you see, roughly a 21% increase in costs. What I want to note here is that the increases that you'll see in governance are largely offset by decreases that you would see in university services, so where we charge back. And it's really just a reflection of more appropriately lining up where some of our staff would be. So notes here. Again, I think I talked about this when we met in April. The controller, the vice president for budget, the general counsel position, were all positions that were previously in university services, charged back out to campuses. After having some conversations, we felt they were more appropriately should be reflected in governance, in what you think of as the kind of the system office proper, if you will. And so we moved all 3 of those positions from university services into governance. So you see the governance budget go up, but I want to assure you on the other side, we reduced the charges to the campuses, so those were offset. The one increase or the one new position that we have here is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Accreditation and Strategic Initiatives. Obviously felt that position was critical to the unified accreditation work that we're doing. So you will see that one in the governance budget. And then the other pieces are simply the NECHI dues are now reflected because of unified accreditation reflected in the system budget. There are offsets that occur at the individual campus budgets now since they don't need to budget those dues. And then board travel is increased to simply reflect that the board is meeting in person now. For a couple of years, we were able to scoop up those savings, and we're incredibly grateful for that, but do need to reflect increases associated with simply returning back to in-person meetings. So university services allocated, this is what you would typically think of as shared services across the system, 391 positions. Roughly half of those are in IT. They're broken out again into a couple of categories. Move these heads. Part of it, think of unified services. So these are the services like the controller's office that we provide centrally to all of the campuses. And then there's a campus services component of that. So again, think of the CBOs and their staff on the individual campuses versus the centralized myself, Miriam, and others. So those numbers in university services allocated are flat from the 2022 levels. The only places where we had any kind of increases, and we were largely able to offset those, were places where the individual campuses made the decision that they wanted another person on the campus in HR or in finance or in a specific area. So those were places where we worked with the campuses on those. The final piece, and I'll be wrapping up my comments here, is what we refer to as university services unallocated. These are typically funded by appropriation or things like investment income. These are often initiatives that you've heard me or other vice chancellors give you updates on. So adult degree completion, early college, some of the system-wide work that we've been doing around marketing, institutional research. You've heard President Farini-Mundi on several occasions talk about the Research Reinvestment Fund. That is funded centrally, as well as capital investments. The Demolition Fund we talked about quite a bit at your April meeting, and as well as other strategic investments, think repaving Main Street and some of those some of those specifics. And then again, in your appendix is a lot of those same slides, but for each of the individual campuses. So that is, Madam Chair, that is the 2023 operating budget. Happy to answer any questions on any of that. I've got most of my colleagues around if there are specific campus questions. But again, thank you for your time, your dedication as we worked our way through this process, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much for that very precise summary of some extraordinary work, and thanks to all the campuses and all the team. This is not easy work, and I think we're at a place that we're getting more comfortable with where we're headed. So great work. Questions, comments? I know we've seen this before, but this is moving toward a resolution for the board, so I want to make sure we have any questions or comments addressed.
Chair Riley.
Yep, Trustee
Quick
Bartholomew.
question, Brian. After we balance the budget for that we're about to vote on here, tell us what does the system have left in reserves for budget stabilization once this is accomplished?
Yeah, so a two-part answer to that. So if you're just looking at the slides, 10.7 million is what we have for a balance. What I would note, and you hear me talk about this at all of our board meetings, is that the way we get funds into the budget stabilization fund is through temporary investment income. And so we've been fortunate over the last couple of years to see positive returns. And that has replenished that fund or allowed us to put more dollars in, allowed us to help out a number of campuses. Through just a few days ago when I had an update, our temporary investment income in relation to budget was down nearly the same exact number. It was down 10.8 million, I believe, as of a few days ago. So in theory, if that's where we ended the fiscal year, it would wipe out any remaining budget stabilization funds we have. So one, we're going to keep our fingers crossed about the markets. I think two, one of the things that that I'm looking at with Miriam is what are some of the expenses that we have? Are there opportunities where we can pull back on some of those? Are there places where we've set aside funds for other projects that maybe we can redeploy back into the budget stabilization fund so we don't end up in a position where that number is back down to zero? So I would expect certainly by the time this committee meets the next time, hopefully we'll be able to give you a little bit better update of one, how the markets are looking, and if we've been able to identify any other resources that we could move in that direction.
Clearly, the budget is not one and done. We need to keep our eyes on all of these moving targets throughout. Other questions? And I can't see everyone, so jump in if.
Trustee Cates and Trustee Irwin.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trustee Cates. Then Trustee Irwin.
Just three quick questions, if I could, Ryan. The capacity for the residence halls, you've got two different numbers there. One is under normal circumstances and two is COVID. Are we in COVID protocols now in terms of the number of rooms that are available to students, or are we wide open again?
Probably a little bit of both. I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to jump in, but in some cases, we do have campuses that are back to 100% capacity. In the past, they might have been at 120% capacity. So we are reflecting that. We do have some campuses that have set aside maybe a floor. So I think it's a little bit of both. But let me see if anyone wants to jump in and add anything to that.
Anybody?
All right. I feel like maybe I got that right then.
Okay, thanks. And one other follow-up. We drove down to New York City this past weekend to see my daughter, and there in Connecticut, former Governor Malloy will be proud to know we saw prominently displayed, go to University of Maine for the same amount of tuition money would cost you in University of Connecticut. And I looked at the out-of-state tuition charges for University of Maine, and I think it was about $44,000. Is that what we're charging for those people from Connecticut, is just Connecticut very expensive and we're just matching that $44,000 figure, or is there some other explanation?
Yeah, there is a different explanation. I don't know if Joan or Joanne want to take that. I'm happy to, if not.
Sure, Joanne can take that, I think.
I'll hopefully get this right. We match the in-state for Connecticut, and so there's a discount between our rate and the Connecticut in-state rate. That's what those billboards promote. Our out-of-state rate is for beyond New England, so that's why we promote that rate. And we didn't go up in that rate either for the last couple of years. But for the New England match program, including Connecticut, that's the match their in-state rates.
Thanks.
You have a third question, Roger?
Well, just very quickly, Ryan, I know that you point out that this is a year-long process now, budgeting. Could you just give us a real quick overview of the challenges you think we're going to be facing next year?
Yeah, actually in July, one of the things that I typically do as part of this meeting is that I present the multi-year financial analysis at the same time. So you just passed the budget. Now I'm going to do a 5-year MYFA, and year one is the version you just passed, and here's how it ripples out for the next 4 years. So typically that's what my process is. I had to work with the chair to push that to July this year, mostly because of all the things that were going on at Farmington and with the retirement incentive. The base for 2023 was just shifting right up until about a week ago. And as you would imagine, to do a 5-year analysis, it takes a lot of time and a lot of staff effort. And if you don't have the first year right, then it's just a useless exercise. And so, at your July meeting, I will present the 5-year multi-year financial analysis that will not only answer that question, it will give you the reasons and show it not just at the system level, but at the campus level as well. So I could speculate a little now, but you're going to see all of the gory details at your next meeting.
Thanks.
Trustee Irwin.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Ryan, again for getting through it, and your team, everyone on the campuses and the system office. This is such a complicated process with so many moving pieces, and so thank you for getting us to where we are once again. This is a big picture question. It doesn't really call for an answer now, but maybe something that you could bring to the board, either at the May meeting or at this committee in the future or whatever. As you know, I've been, I find that CPI versus actual to be a very compelling picture, and the loss of buying power for the system of the state appropriation, a portion of our budget to inflation is $40+ million this year. All right. So, and if we, what I'm wondering is whether you've done this exercise or could do the exercise to take that loss and add in the difference in tuition based on our having restrained growth in tuition over a similar period of time to show what the overall loss in budget, our revenue relative to inflation has been over a similar period of time, 2008, maybe not that, but whatever you think is a relevant period of time. So that, to me, I think it would be very helpful for the board and the public to see that the overall kind of revenue situation of the system is very different relative to what it was at the beginning of whatever period you choose, and 2008 seems like an appropriate one. And that has major, and has had, and will continue to have major implications for the system and how the system, affords to operate, and what kind of prioritization has to take place. But I think it would just be a helpful exercise to see just how different we look now compared to the way it was in 2008, for example, because of the loss of purchasing power from a combination of inflation and tuition not growing even at that rate. So to me, it would really put in context just the kind of challenges that the board and leadership has to deal with going forward. So
Yep,
I guess that's a request.
Yep, absolutely. We can absolutely do that. I think that's a great request.
Yep, and always that question before us of balancing the affordability to the state and the affordability to the students and getting it right. Okay, anybody else? David, Trustee McMahon.
Ryan, what's the degree of confidence you and your colleagues have in the tuition forecast? What the credit hour forecast, the revenue that comes from that? Are you in the high 90s of confidence there, or are we having some concerns?
Yeah, I think we do. I'm going to invite Robert to jump in here in just a second. I know just from participating in conversations with the chancellor and the various leadership teams, there's certainly some concern about how things are looking. Overall, though, I will say this will ring true, especially for Trustee Irwin and those folks that have been with us for 10 years or so. I would put up our process for for predicting credit hours up against anyone. I feel like it was a challenge for us 5, 6, 7 years ago. I give just a tremendous amount of credit to Robert and his team to bring the data side into this, to look back and as well as looking forward about birth rates and those type of things. So I feel incredibly comfortable that we've got a process in place to do this and to do this right. Now, whether there are external forces out there specifically related to COVID that are blowing up that great process, I'll leave to Robert to add. But COVID aside, again, great process. Robert.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for the kudos. Obviously, it's a big team, including many members of your team and you yourself. The model that we have created is in the high 90s % accuracy. I have every confidence that it gets us close enough to have comfortable budgets, and then we add a little bit of conservative interpretation to it as well, so that sort of cut the give it a haircut at the end, and then the universities get a round of, we're going to do these sorts of initiatives to increase it. And so it's a really inclusive and cyclical process. The last thing that Ryan sort of indicated, what it can't do is know something that is a complete change in behavior. So it's a model of everything, given what we have known from the past and all the indicators that are current, we have a fair prediction. But COVID has changed the game, and that's what we're seeing right now. And that's what I'm personally worried about, and many of my colleagues. Going into the high schools towards the end of the semesters, the students were just frankly disconnected, tired. They weren't engaging like they have in the past. We're seeing that play out in our matriculations and enrollment beyond any level that we could have predicted. So it's all hands on deck in the enrollment shops. The chancellor looks at the numbers every day, and therefore we all look at them a couple of times a day. And we're doing the best we can to react to it, but I am concerned. So for fall.
If I could just join that for 1 second. We do post a lot of information, and we are on a net matriculation basis down from the 2019 numbers, which is what I pegged that we should measure ourselves to. We're down about 400, but we've closed that gap in recent days. And I think, there may be just students making later decisions, but we are closing that gap. So I'm a little bit more nervous than Robert is, but we're within striking distance. I would love to see us on a freshman and our new students and transfers be in a position to close that gap further in the coming days.
An early warning. President Freni-Mundy.
I can assure you all I'm more nervous than both the chancellor and Robert, but as we look at these projections, which are very close and very good and very helpful, there a big factor is sort of looking back, looking at past patterns and working with those. And what we are trying to do here, and we'll do it in consultation, of course, with Robert and others, is refine those models to reflect specific initiatives that we might have underway, in particular programs, colleges, retention efforts, changes in our enrollment management practices, looking at national benchmarking and so forth, to see if we can get even tighter projections to help us plan. So it's a very dynamic and evolving area, but it's been extremely helpful to have the systems work in this as well.
Thank you. Other questions? And again, I can't see everyone, if somebody wants to jump in. Okay, well, this conversation clearly lays out the pathway of some challenges before us, but great opportunities, and we need to keep our eye on the ball here, both around enrollment and meeting these budget projections. So if there's no further questions, can we move to a resolution to bring to the board at its meeting on May 23rd? Could I, and let me read that motion, that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and approves the FY 2023 updated proposed university and system office operating and capital budget, recommended student charges, and proposed transfers from institutional reserves, including the budget stabilization funds. Could I have a motion? Moved by Chair Gardner. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Irwin. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Ellen, can you take the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Kane.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee Gardner.
Yes.
Trustee Cates.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Martin.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great, thank you very much. I know this is a long meeting, and I would encourage people, if they need to take stretch breaks, to go off video and stand. We know, even though it looks like you're off video, you're still with us. You're just standing and stretching. And we will crank ahead and make sure that we get back on schedule if we possibly can. So let me move us to an issue we've discussed considerably in this committee, and that the Chancellor has been a real leader in having us focus in on the infrastructure itself and move to the one-year capital plan.
Okay, well, good morning, and thank you, Chair Riley. I will do my best to help get the team back onto schedule. And as you've mentioned, we have seen this briefing before. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and bring up the presentation mode. But I'm definitely going to just focus on the higher level discussion for this.
And I should have been clear, Nate, I'm sorry, Nate Harris, the
Yes.
Associate Director for Capital Planning.
Sorry, yeah, thank you. And so here's a quick overview. And as I mentioned, the project.
I don't think we can see your screen yet.
Oh, you cannot. Okay, let me give it a moment, see if it'll catch up.
And while we wait, we will just add our kudos to Chip Gavin and tell him how much he'll be missed and how deeply grateful we are to all his work.
All right, can you see the slide now?
No, sir.
All right, let me exit out. Let's go share my screen here.
Success.
Okay, there we go. And I will just throw this into presentation mode, and hopefully you will still be able to see that. Do you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you. And I'll just go right back up. I'm Nate Harris, the Associate Director for Capital Planning. And as has been mentioned, we have seen these projects before. The funding the projects that are being funded through the operating funds, this is the third time those are being briefed to you. And this is the second time you're seeing the projects that are being funded from all funds. And this is the capital plan that will go forward to the board on the 23rd of May. So operating funds, these mirror the projects and the funding that was discussed just previous by Vice Chancellor Lowe. And this is how those funds are being used across the campuses. And again, that same data, but the type of projects that they are going to fund.
Hey, Nate, unless it's different for everyone, we only see your introduction slide.
Okay, that is bizarre. Let me try this one more time. Let me stop my share one more time. Share again. Let's try this. Okay, so you should see a system levels funding slide. Is that the case?
We do.
Okay.
Small but visible.
Okay, let's see if we can make this better. Okay.
We've lost you. I think small and visible is a goal. It's okay.
Oh, okay, well, I apologize for the challenge here. Let's try this one more time. Okay.
Perfect.
Great. All right, so as we move on along and look at the all funds, these are not only operating funds, but this looks at how the various universities are spending, planning their projects using bond funding, fundraising, grants, and reserves. So we're talking about $144.6 million. This is a significant increase over the $91 million that was planned for last year. I think that's too advanced now. As we look at the types of funds, types of projects, excuse me, that are being, this money is going towards, you can see new space is the predominant cost, but that is nothing new. But what is new is the amount of money that's going into projects, specifically building systems, renovations, renewals, and utility infrastructures. For example, building systems at $16.8 million. That is a significant increase compared to what was planned for last year, which was $1.6 million. So you're seeing a lot more work going into the bones of the facilities to keep them up and running. This year, a lot of that funding is going to new HVAC projects or repairs. So here's a quick look at University of Maine and University of Maine Machias. Here's their operating funds, the plans on how they're going to spend that. And then they're all funds and the projects associated. Here's the same at UMA. You'll see their operating funds on the left and the types of projects that they are looking to fund, and on the right, all the funds together. Here is University of Maine at Farmington. Here's a look at Fort Kent. Here's Presque Isle. And finally, here's USM. So again, this last slide kind of shows how all of these fundings go to meet the Gordian targets. So when Gordian develops their targets, they're looking at how we are repairing, fixing, and keeping up our current facilities. So they exclude some of the costs that we've identified, things going to new facilities, costs that are going towards athletic fields or infrastructure, utilities or grounds that support multiple facilities. So they look at each individual facility and where we may be making repairs in the envelope, the system, or doing renovations and renewals. And as you can see, this year, in the first year in many years, we're exceeding that blue target line. As a reminder, that annual stewardship, when we fall below that blue line, we're increasing the risk of having facilities fail. When we go above that blue line, we're reducing that risk as we continue to keep our facilities running. And then that purple line, that is the target to reach when we're looking to decrease our overall NAV. And so that's a look at where we are. Obviously, a lot of work has gone into this, and you can see, I think, from this slide that the universities are paying attention to that data that's coming in from Gordian, where they need to be spending their money, balancing that, the needs of existing facilities with the needs for growth, and adding some new facilities as well. And so with that, I certainly like to open up to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Nate. And if you can now eliminate your favorite slideshow
Yeah.
and see you all back. And I would point out before we jump into questions, Ryan and I have talked a bit about this, and the minutes should reflect that while we approve the capital plan at a high level, we're not approving individual projects within it. Those have to come back to us, and that Ryan and I are talking about a crosswalk whereby we can look at the priorities in Gordian against the priorities of each campus. Again, recognizing that funding may not be available for the highest priorities of Gordian, but that we're going to have to make some tough decisions as we look at individual projects. So,
And that,
Nate, sorry.
yes, I was just saying that is a great point, and you will see some of the projects that are coming before you today are reflected in this capital plan, but they are bringing those to you to get approval for those individual projects as they exceed those dollar thresholds.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments? Again, a major step forward to sort of put this focus on infrastructure again this year. Anybody? Questions, comments? All right, then if anybody who has, I can't see on my screen, jump in. Let's then move right to our resolution. This will be on the consent agenda for the May meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Finance, Facilities, and Technology Committee and approves the FY 2023 capital plan as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Cates, seconded by Trustee Rotundo. And Ellen will take the roll.
Trustee King,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon, Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes,
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
great. And thank you, Nate, for the great work, and we will look forward to its implementation.
Thank you, ma'am.
This takes us to the steam plant at the University of Maine, and I believe President Freeney Mundy.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a proposal to authorize a $640,000 expense. I'm going to introduce Stuart Harvey, who is UMaine's Executive Director for Facilities and Capital Management Services, to describe this quickly.
Thank you, President Freeney Mundy. Chair Riley, this request this morning is for a complete rebuild of what we call pit SA10 in our underground infrastructure, steam infrastructure. SA10 has been a part of our infrastructure for a long time, and the first information we have on SA10 describes it as steam pit 6 in a set of 1948 construction drawings for when a 6-inch line was brought from between Dunn and Corbett up to the corner of Long Road and Jim Drive. Further expansions to that pit occurred in 1958 and in 1960. So this pit's been around for a long time, is in need of complete rebuild. I should also mention that it is a critical node in our underground steam infrastructure, approximately 5 miles of steam infrastructure on the University of Maine campus. And I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Any concerns? Seeing none, we will move to the text of the resolution. That the Board of Trustees, acting through the Finance, Facility, and Technology Committee, authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to expend up to $640,000 in campus annual capital budget funds to replace steam pit SA10 located on the Orono campus. Can I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Moved by, was that Trustee Cates, and seconded by Trustee Kane.
I believe the motion was from Trustee Irwin.
Sorry.
And this particular item is in the purview of the FFT committee, so it will not be forwarded to the board. Trustee Kane.
Yes.
Trustee Irwin.
Yes.
Trustee Gardner.
Yes.
Trustee Cates.
Yes.
Trustee McMahon.
Yes.
Trustee Martin.
Yes.
Trustee Riley.
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great, thank you. And let's stay with the University of Maine. We'll move on to tab 4, the lease modification proposal. President Preeny Mundy.
Thank you, Chair. Riley, we'll go back to Stuart. This is for an extension of a lease that we have with Verizon. Stuart.
Yes, thank you again. So back in February, we received a request from Verizon through their lease consultant MD7 to amend our lease with them by several terms. So the first term was a new rent amount of $1,450 per month, a new rent escalator of 5% for every term. That was a new term because the existing lease in 2019 didn't actually have any term extensions. So, and the third one was an additional renewal terms of 4 or 5 year renewals, which was new again from the existing lease. They did ask for one other amendment, which was to release them from the requirement to get a letter of consent for any renewals or equipment changes that they made. We rejected that request. So we will continue to require them to give us notice and receive a letter of consent from University of Maine, Machias for any equipment changes. So that is the amendment request.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Any questions on the lease modification? Seeing, hearing none. This is a proposal for the consent agenda for the board meeting. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to enter into a 5-year lease with MD7 LLC with options for 4 additional 5-year renewals for approximately 131 gross square feet adjacent to and associated space on the roof of Torrey Hall on the Machias campus, with all final terms and conditions subject to review and approval by the University of Maine System Trust Treasurer and General Counsel. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Kane, seconded by
Second.
Trustee Rotundo. Ellen?
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. And it's still with the University of Maine, tab 5, the ground lease authorization for Theta Chi.
Thank you very much. This is a proposal that we enter into a ground lease for the land at 379 College Avenue. And with me today to discuss this with you are Kenda Shealy, Associate VP for Student Life, and Lori Sedelko, Assistant Dean and Director for Community Life. And I'll turn it to Kenda.
I can give a brief overview. Theta Chi is a fraternity in good standing. Their lease has expired a couple of years ago through no fault of their own. We had not previously been able to get that lease renewed. COVID happened, which created some confusion, as well as they had some illness on their housing board, who actually technically owns the house. So we are just looking for this to be on the consent agenda to initiate a 30-year lease with Theta Chi, which is very much in keeping with the same leases that you have seen previously with other fraternities on the University of Maine campus.
Thank you. Any questions about the Theta Chi lease? Seeing none, we will move to the resolution for the consent agenda, that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to enter into a ground lease for the land at 379 College Avenue, Orono, Maine, for the terms of 30 years, with all final terms and conditions subject to review and approval by the University of Maine System Treasurer and General Counsel. May I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. That was Trustee Irwin, right?
Yeah, I took off my orange shirt so you wouldn't get me mixed up with Roger.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's take the roll.
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Cates,
Orange shirt votes yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes,
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
great. And by some miracle, we're back on schedule. And I have a sneaking suspicion it's a red shirt for the Red Sox, but just saying.
It is.
All right, let's move to tab 6, the issue of stewardship, deferred maintenance, HVAC systems, and control upgrades at the University of Maine. President Farini Mundy.
Thank you. This is a request to authorize spending up to $10 million funded through a combination of resources for the upgrading of obsolete and unreliable building HVAC systems. And I'll turn it to Joanne, who will then introduce the item more fully and discuss it with you and with Stuart.
Okay, thank you, President Farini Mundy. I will say that we have included this deferred maintenance item on our rolling capital master plan that we presented to you in March, as well as on our 1 year in our multi-year capital planning documents. When we present our rolling capital master plan to our community, which we've done a number of times, what we hear back many times is that HVAC is one of our biggest complaints on campus from our faculty, our staff, and our researchers. And that got even more so to be the case with the COVID situation, I believe. So we thought about it, and Stuart and I thought about how it is that we could use some operational funds, but primarily borrow, most likely tax-exempt bonding, and Tracy's going to present a resolution in that regard in just a few minutes, to upgrade a number of projects in sort of a bulk kind of approval for you. Some are small, some are larger. Stuart will present that, of HVAC projects that address this major need for University of Maine. So, we're pleased to present this to you today. We believe that we will have utility savings for such projects as these, and we also have these net metering credits that we are saving for these kind of efficiency HVAC projects as well. So we do have the funding to pay for the debt service as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stuart.
Thank you, Joanne. So this is we're really excited about this this request. From an operational perspective, which is where I spend a lot of my time, and being a mechanical engineer and having spent much of my career in the HVAC systems on the university campus, this is really an important step forward for us as we move into our new R1 status, and try to continue to support and further support our research operations. Many of the projects that we're proposing are in research, heavy research-based buildings, and many of them are getting to or past their useful life, and several of them are already past their useful life. We spend a considerable amount of HVAC technicians' time chasing these HVAC systems and trying to provide their optimization to meet the needs of the building. It's really critical for the continued operation of many of the things that we're trying to do to do this work. So we're really thankful for this opportunity to bring this forward, and would also say that the age of many of these really caused a struggle to meet some of the requirements that have come through as a part of the COVID response. Increasing of outside air, additional filtration, all of those critical, some of those critical steps that were being asked of us during the pandemic, we weren't able to meet because of the age and condition. So we're going to be working to increase their capability while we do this work. So I will stop there and open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for your enthusiasm for this important work. It's very important, and we don't spend enough time thanking people for this. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Trustee Cates?
Thank you. Is this proposal part of the capital investment plan we just approved?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, these items are on the capital plan.
Thanks.
Yep.
Chair Riley, it's David. Stuart, do you know approximately what the return of investment is going to be here? We're planning to spend about $10 million. What's the reduction in annual operating costs that you anticipate when all 10 million is spent?
We have not calculated that project by project, Trustee McMahon, but we will, certainly will. If you think about this just fundamentally, much of the technology we're going to be replacing is not variable speed. It's energy management systems all run on constant speed ventilation systems. The technology changes alone should provide considerable energy savings and comfort improvements. So we haven't calculated those yet, but expect to and would certainly be willing to share them when we do that.
Other questions? Anybody else? Okay, thank you, and we'll look forward to that report over time. We then have a resolution for the consent agenda that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of FFT and authorizes the University of Maine system, acting through the University of Maine, to spend up to $10 million funded through a combination of operating funds and external loans to upgrade obsolete and unreliable building HVAC systems and update critical parts of Orono's existing building energy management system. Final terms and conditions of financing will be approved by the Vice Chancellor of Finance and Administration and Treasurer. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Trustee Kane, seconded by Trustee Irwin, and Ellen will take the vote.
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes,
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
great, thank you. And we are moving to tab 13, which is the financing and reimbursement piece of the HVAC system and controls. And Tracy Elliott, Vice President of Finance, I believe, is going to take this one. Hi, Tracy. You're on mute.
Not mute, but microphone's not working.
Oh, your microphone isn't working. Uh-oh.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. And thank you, Trustee Riley. So this financing reimbursement resolution before you today relates to the HVAC approval that you just did. And it gives us some opportunities to look at various financing options, including revenue bonds, lease purchase arrangements, or other notes or forms of indebtedness. And the purpose is to minimize interest expense and to allow the construction activity to happen in a way that's most efficient for financing. It also meets the requirements of state statute and other regulations. And the reimbursement piece allows costs that are incurred 60 days prior to board approval to be subsequently reimbursed with such financings. I would note and apologize that I observed that the resolution itself does need an adjustment. It needs to be changed to allow for a full board approval and not consent approval, because financing is the responsibility of the full board. Happy to take any questions, but that is the purpose of this resolution.
Thank you, Tracy. Comments on the financing of this initiative? Questions? Seeing none. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Kane, seconded by Trustee Irwin. Ellen?
I'll just read the resolution because we haven't done
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
yet.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was my failure. After I changed the full board. So this goes to the full board that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of FFT and approves the financing and project authorization resolution and the reimbursement of project expenditure resolution related to the issuance of debt for upgrades to building HVAC systems and controls and updates to the existing building energy management system and software, at Maine with the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $10 million. Now we have a motion, and now we can take the vote.
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Cates,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes.
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. Switching gears, we'll move to the University of Maine at Farmington, tab 7, and discuss facade replacement, fitness and recreation center. Laurie, I think Laurie Gardner, the Chief Business Officer, will take us through this one.
Thank you, Trustee Riley. The University of Maine at Farmington requests authorization to spend up to $925,000 to replace the brick facade at the Fitness and Recreation Center with insulated steel panels. This project is not on the capital plan previously approved by the trustees, but is on the capital plan being reviewed for the upcoming fiscal year 23, which you've just seen, and currently on the 2018 state bond project list for UMF. This project has picked us as the siding is failing and water is saturating the plywood behind the brick facade. The project will remove all existing wall panels and install new insulated metal panels. The facade is a thin brick veneer that's installed over foam board insulation with a plywood backer. The campus has hired contractors in the past to glue the veneer back. And at this time, the insulation and plywood are failing from the exposure to the elements. This project will create energy savings as the wall panels will have a 20 to 25% R value increase from the existing wall structure. And a full design is complete and ready to go. Once this is approved, the project will start as soon as a contractor has been identified and no disturbances to services will occur, as this project is focused on the exterior of the building. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Laurie. Questions? Seeing none, we'll go right to the resolution that the Board of Trustees, acting through the FFT Committee, authorizes the University of Maine system, acting through the University of Maine at Farmington, to expend up to $925,000 to replace the brick facade at the Fitness and Recreation Center on the University of Maine Farmington campus. Funding for this project would be from 2018 state bond funds. Could I have a motion?
Moved.
Moved. I think it was moved by Trustee Irwin and seconded by Trustee Gardner. Ellen, can we have a vote?
Certainly. And this action is also within the purview of the committee, so it will not be going forward to the board. Trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Irwin,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Cates,
Yes.
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Martin,
Yes.
trustee Riley,
Yes.
trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move up to Presque Isle, tab 8. We've seen this before, I believe, but let's talk about the Wheaton Hall renovation project.
Good morning, Chair Riley and all others. Originally, the Wheaton Hall project had a ceiling of $6,257,000. It was phased in 2 parts. The first part, the electrical, done last summer. The second part, the actual building renovation with roof replacement this summer. We went out to bid in February, and the bids for the construction came in 33% higher than we had hoped. The good news is that we had received almost $1.4 million in donation to support this project, specifically identified to support this project from the Smith Family Foundation. Our goal is to raise the level of the proposed budget to $7.652280 and to use the donation from the Smith Family Foundation instead of being used to offset our internal loan, to use for the actual construction costs. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Questions? Anyone? Seeing none, I will move to the resolution, which is again for the consent agenda. that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine at Presque Isle to increase the total renovation budget of the Wheaton Hall renovation to $7,652,280 and to allow donations from the Smith Family Foundation amounting to $1.395 million to be used as funding for this renovation. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Kane, seconded by Trustee Rotundo. Ellen?
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tab 9 brings us to the naming of the new Career and Student Success Center at the University of Southern Maine. And
Thank you,
we have President Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We put before you the name of a couple, a long-standing friend of the universities, for the naming of our soon-to-be completed Student Success and Career Center at the Portland campus here at the University of Southern Maine. These individuals are people who are well known throughout the state with exceptional principles, generosity, character, and community commitment. They are also the foundation of our Hallmark Promise Scholars program that now has almost 100 students in it to graduate almost debt-free or completely debt-free. I'm going to turn it over now to our president of the University of Maine Foundation, Ainsley Wallace. We'll talk about some specific naming event in the process going forward.
Thank you. Ainsley?
Yes, nice to see you again, Chair Riley and members of the FFT committee. What I would add to what President Cummings said is that these two individuals are among USM's top 5 donors of all time. They have leveraged their own support to raise more than $10 million on behalf of student scholarships. They've invited in multiple generations of their family. And what's extraordinary is that they're not graduates of the institution. They are just friends who care deeply about accessible, high quality public education. And we're honored to bring their names forward in relationship to the Career and Student Success Center. We appreciate the trustees addressing this issue anonymously. If approved by the trustees, the University of Southern Maine and the USM Foundation intend to publicly announce the name of the Career and Student Success Center at a public event on September 21st, 2022.
Great, thank you, Ainsley. Any questions? Seeing none, we will move again. This is for the consent agenda. The resolution reads as follows: that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Southern Maine to name the future Career and Student Success Center, with the naming details to be announced publicly at a later date. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Kane, seconded by Trustee Cates. Ellen?
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
Trustee Irwin,
Yes.
Trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Yes.
Trustee McMahon,
Yes.
Trustee Martin,
Yes.
Trustee Riley,
Yes.
Trustee Rotundo.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Great. Nice to see the Career and Student Success Center coming closer to reality. Thank you both. Let's move on to tab 10. We have some important reports ahead of us, and turn to Carolyn and ask Carolyn McDonough from the Director of Capital Planning to get an update on capital projects and bond projects.
Thank you, Chair Riley. Good morning, everyone. The report this month reflects a total of 26 projects, and we're nearing the $300 million mark. We've got about $275 million on the list right now, and with the meeting today, we just added another 13 million, about 13 million to that. So no surprise that that number's going up. The comment I'd like to take note of, you've noticed today, we're still experiencing market impacts related to COVID and other market instances. And so you've seen, you've approved today 2 projects that came in well over budget as a result of that. As I noted in the notes as well, we've had a number of projects that have come in either with no bids or a few other projects that have also come in significantly over, and I suspect you'll be seeing a couple more at the next meeting for approvals. So that's the state of construction right now. It's pretty intense out there. There's a lot of work going on. The contractors are all busy, and we're doing the best we can to get people to bid on our projects and to get good pricing, but it's definitely a struggle. For the bond project report, we're looking at about 55 projects, and we've spent nearly just over half of the $49 million in bonds. We've got $63 million total worth of work on that list and being planned, and we will need to be wrapping that up in the next year and a half or so. I have a few updates further down in the report, including a small research space that was approved over the last few months for a lease in Orono. Then the Harold Alfond Foundation grant projects, the athletic projects, as I mentioned earlier, were some of the projects that we had bidding issues with. One of the 3 projects had no bidders. The other 2 bids came in as significantly higher than anticipated. The plan forward right now, I believe, is to move forward with just one, the softball project at Maine, and the other 2 we will be putting back out to bid and adjusting things. More to come probably at the next meeting on those. The engineering and computer information science master plan is still underway. We have a final, a draft of that report in hand just now. So we should have more information and be ready to start moving forward on that one soon as well. The Furlan Engineering Education and Design Center continues in construction and with the anticipated completion this summer and occupancy for the fall semester. And we have finally begun construction and demolition and construction at the 304th Street project for the law school and others down in Portland. Also in Portland at USM, the development projects continue with the expectation of completion a little over a year from now. One other thing I'd like to mention is the University of Maine's energy project, energy center project that has been, we've not provided an update in a while. We will be providing one in the coming meetings, but in general, that project was last seen by the board in 2019. And since then, with some legislation or law changes, and the university was able to reduce the scope due to some net billing, remove the electrical component of the project. So the final scoping phase of the project was completed just last March. And the next phase, as the university completes a design build contract with Honeywell, that's expected to be done here in the coming months, and that project will take the design portion of the project will take about a year, with construction following that. So again, a more formal update on that will be coming at the next report probably, but just wanted to put that out there as well. That's all I have.
Thanks, Carolyn. Tough times to be thinking about construction given cost inflation. Questions, comments about tab 10 and Carolyn's report? Anyone? Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are Moving now to our responsibilities in oversight of risk management and an enterprise risk management update with Gretchen Capp.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Riley. This morning, I have an update for everyone regarding enterprise risk management and specifically the risks assigned to the FFT Committee for Oversight. So I will go ahead and share my screen. As you may recall, each risk has been assigned to a board committee for oversight as recommended by the trustees. We've also taken it a step further and recommended and assigned a management locus of control for each risk as well. That management locus of control is responsible for helping identify control strategies as well as ensure that they're implemented. Overall, the enterprise risk management is monitoring 20 enterprise risks, and 3 of those have been assigned to this committee for oversight. The next 2 slides just give you a general overview of the entire all 20 risks. And now we'll move into the actual risks assigned to this committee for review. So the first one that we have is an infrastructure loss threatening to the continuity of operations. This has been assigned to the Chief Facilities Management and General Services Officer for oversight. And overall control strategies are generally preventative maintenance. We do disclose the risks to the trustees. We have capital planning focused on infrastructure improvements, which we've already seen today in the presentations provided. We have facility audits that help prioritize loss prevention, and business interruption insurance, which is included in our property insurance coverage. Next, we have a data breach or cyber incident, which is assigned to our Chief Information Officer for oversight. Control strategies for this particular risk include compliance training. We do have an information security policy, and it's one thing to say that we have a policy, but this is an actively reviewed and living policy, which is great to hear and great to see in action. We also, the Chief Information Officer and his team do internal assessments using the NIST standards. We have encryption, multi-factor authentication, internal tracking, for particular risks, especially as we look at the global landscape of cyber risks. We also do ongoing intrusion detection and vulnerability scanning to help us inform what our control strategies should be as well. And finally, we have natural disasters threatening to life or property, which is also assigned to the Chief Facilities Management and General Services Officer. And control strategies for this particular risk include safety and environmental management, crisis response and planning strategies, and emergency command structure, which includes an emergency response team. We also conduct facility audits with our property insurer to help us identify where our greatest risks are and where we should be prioritizing improvements. Our new construction guidelines follow FM Global building guidelines, which, when required by the property insurance, and these oftentimes go above and beyond the code, so they are enhanced safety protocols. In addition, we have a FEMA grant that's been awarded to risk management for pre-disaster mitigation planning, and we also have various different insurances. So before I move on to the next slides, I just wanted to open it up to see if anybody had any questions or feedback regarding the control strategies reviewed today.
If anybody does, just jump in, please.
Madam Chair, it's Mark Gardner. I just wanted to compliment the work. This is great to see, and it's very well done, and pleasing to see how it's come along over the last year or so. So very, very good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thanks, Gretchen. Let's move on.
We will move on then. This is a very high level, just another graphical depiction of how we can view the risks. Those that are in the lower left quadrant present the lower level risks, and those in the upper right quadrant present the greatest risks to the university. And finally, we have pandemic risks. So we've been living this now for about 2 years, and just wanted to highlight that this is addressed in risk number 10. We have actively been employing our emergency response team into action. This has proven to be hugely beneficial for the entire university system, as oftentimes our safety protocols have helped us, the university as a whole, be one of the safest places to be during the pandemic. So many thanks to all the campuses, presidents, CBOs, and everyone involved in helping make that happen. Finally, we also know that there are reputational risks that come with dealing with a pandemic. And so that is covered in risk 14. And we have rolled out the Together for Maine page, which has also proven to be a great resource for the general public as well as our students and employees. And our updates don't stop here. We'll be planning on coming to the investment committee later on this month to provide an update there. The academic and student affairs in August, and then rounding out with the audit committee for a more comprehensive review of all the risks in October. So I will stop sharing now, and I'm happy to entertain any questions or feedback that people may have.
Thank you, Gretchen. Great work, and sure gives us comfort as an oversight board that there's this diligence on these identification and follow-up of risk. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair?
Trustee Cates and then Trustee Bartholomew.
Thank you. Gret, could you just tell us who is on the emergency response team? And do they meet periodically, even if there's no emergency, or what's the structure of that group? Thanks.
Excellent question. Thank you. So each campus has identified an incident commander, and the incident commanders meet at least weekly, if not more frequently, depending on the various where the pandemic is driving us. So the incident commander for each campus may be a different role. Oftentimes it's the CBO for each campus. Does that answer your question?
It does. But is that emergency response team the same team that would meet if there was some other kind of emergency, like a natural disaster? It's the same team?
It is.
Thanks.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Trustee Bartholomew.
Thank you. Gretchen, quick question for you. And I was thinking about this while you were going through the risks and info security risk. What is how often do we reevaluate these risks or restack rank them and weight them? And the reason I say that is because as we kind of continue through the back end of this pandemic or endemic state, we have hybrid workforces, and how do we adjust our model to these changes and dynamics?
So excellent question. We do meet on a quarterly basis, if not more frequently, depending on the landscape of the particular risk. And so we have met with the Chief Information Officer and David Demers regarding the cyber threats and risks. Does that answer your particular question, or did you want additional clarity?
And there's a cadence though that you evaluate the risk profiles outlined here and
sure.
Add new variables as they come online. I guess that's what I was getting to. Yeah.
Yeah, so the overall enterprise risks we do review on a regular basis. I look at them at least monthly to get a general sense of where we are. I can tell you from the Chief Information Officer's perspective, and I'll look to David to also feel free to weigh in on this, but for the Chief Information Officer, they look at their risks every day. They have an active risk matrix separate from my own where they monitor. David, anything that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Gretchen, and thank you for the question, Trustee Bartholomew. It's an ongoing effort. Regulations change constantly, and we're constantly trying to adjust our approaches and making sure that we're putting mitigation strategies in place to align with those regulatory updates and changes. So it is an ongoing effort, as Gretchen had indicated. In terms of the risk matrix, again, my Chief Information Security Officer and I do meet with Gretchen regularly to look at that matrix that she presents in terms of overall score. I'm still troubled that the information or the cybersecurity risk is the top one up in that upper right-hand corner. But in all reality, what happens is cyber risks occur daily. but the materiality of those breaches. So every time somebody responds to a spam email or a phishing email, that constitutes a cyber security breach at a very low level. But the materiality isn't necessarily a line. It's not a $10 million risk that we're talking about. The larger scale ones are less frequent, but they do have catastrophic effects. So we're trying to figure out a way to better present what the overall combined risk and materiality is for our cybersecurity posture. And again, that's an ongoing effort that we're working with Gretchen to be able to present to this group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question, Trish.
Yep, Trustee Kane.
I'm just thinking about the cybersecurity threats. Do you know if there is any correlation between being an R1 institution and whether or not that increases the likelihood of security risks from a data breach perspective? I'm just, again, sort of wondering aloud, but it seems like things like password management and, UB keys and things like that would be extra important for managing that kind of sensitive research related information. I'm curious if we know if nationally there's any correlation between those things we should be aware of.
So I'll invite Joan to respond as well, but I'll take that one, Emily, if that's okay. So we know that it does put a little bit of a bigger target on our back, if you will, just the higher visibility. The correlation is because of the amount of data that is available, just generated through research. So the more data that we have stored in various systems, obviously the risk goes up a little bit more. With that, we know that there are very rigid standards in place, particularly with Department of Defense, in terms of protection of the data that we collect through research activities. And we're working very closely with the University of Maine's Research Compliance Office on making sure that those standards are upheld in terms of how we protect the data that's collected. So it is a constantly evolving aspect, just like I said, with the regulatory landscape, and we're constantly playing catch up, but we definitely have eyes on that risk and making sure that we're managing it appropriately.
I'll just amplify what David says. It's a great question, Trustee Kane, and yes, just the level of research and the nature of what we do here does bring those risks, but the regulation is very precise and very thorough, and we work to stay in compliance with it constantly, have regular meetings with the research compliance team here and David's office, and also the major researchers whose groups are required to have these high-level cybersecurity protections. It's interesting, it's becoming a serious issue in additive manufacturing. So that is somewhere in between the risk section, the data protection, and the research itself. So it's a great question.
Thank you, both.
Yeah, really good question. Thank you. Others? Seeing none, thank you so much, Gretchen, and we will move on. And it was a nice segue to David Demers on the review of IT projects with a value of $250,000 or greater.
Thank you, Chair Riley. And I was really expecting I would have to put on my speed talking voice here, but I think we have plenty of time. So luckily, we'll be able to get through this at a leisurely pace. Just a couple of informational items to share. You do have a slide deck in your packet. I'm going to start with the one that we are wrapping up, thankfully, and that is our overall, the final step of rolling out voice over IP for all of our campuses. USM is the remaining campus. We are still making steady progress in rolling out IP handsets on that campus. We're at 90% completion at this point. The big thing I'd like to share on this one is that we did finally turn off our last legacy phone gateway at the LIC campus. And that is really going to go a long way to mitigating failure risk across the board for all of our campuses. So there was celebration to be heard when that one is actually decommissioned and turned off, and the equipment is actually being deprecated and removed from that particular facility as we speak. We expect that as we enter the fall 22 semester, we will have completed this project. We're going to hopefully supply chains allow us to move forward with our plan for the remaining handset deployments on the Portland and the Gorham campuses. But we are on track to wrap this one up finally. So good news on that one. I want to jump a little bit to the Main Street, and you might recall last time I broke this up into two buckets because in essence we have two funded projects for this. The first one is the Main Street user experience enhancements that we had reported previously that we had built out the new Main Street experience. That is live, it's in production, great response from the students. That's in effect. We are continuing to roll out new functionality in that environment. The most recent one is Schedule Builder. I am very pleased to report we've made significant progress with Schedule Builder. I want to give you a quick concept of what Schedule Builder does for a student in that it dynamically builds optional or options for different schedules based on a student's degree program and what their scheduling constraints might be, work, practice, things that they need to do at home. What this tool allows a student to do is not go and individually look for specific course sections that meet their scheduling needs, but will dynamically look at what they have blocked off, what they need, and then plug in recommended sections that meet with their overall degree progress. So they start the Schedule Builder. It walks them through in a wizard-like fashion, similar to what you might do in Amazon.com or something like that. It allows the student to import courses if they already have them mapped out in their degree planner, or they've already added courses from prior semesters to a shopping cart or a wait list. They can actually import those courses, what they need for that particular semester, into the tool. In addition, it allows the student to actually set aside unschedulable blocks, such as work and or practice, as you're showing here on the right-hand side of the screen. Once the student has basically said what they need to take and when they can't actually take a course, what's not available on their schedule, they punch a button and it's going to show them these are the courses you're interested in signing up for. It generates a series of options, a series of schedules that might work based on their criteria. So in this example I'm showing you here, it's going to map it out in a weekly basis. It's going to show you which courses, which sections they're signing up for or should sign up for. And it's hard to see on the screen, but up at the top, you can see there are 50 different options that the student can go through to pick one that meets their criteria. Now, another thing that's kind of cool about this from the student perspective is that you can actually sort those options based on a number of criteria, including course sections with the earliest average start time. I have a feeling that's probably not the most popular option with the students. The latest average start time, compressing all the schedules into the least amount of days as possible, or to spread it out over the most days across the week. So it gives the student control to look at and prioritize course schedules that will work best for them. Then what happens is they pick one that seems to work for them. They send it off to their advisor for review. The advisor is able to review that with the student, make sure everything matches, and then they can enroll in those courses. And what happens at this point is once they punch that enroll button, if they've been approved by their advisor and their advisor assigns them an enrollment PIN, they put their PIN in, they validate, and they are able to enroll in the courses directly from Schedule Builder. Now in this example, it's showing errors because I didn't enter a PIN, but it will show them a confirmation that you are enrolled in this course section, and here is your actual schedule for the semester. So again, this is going to save students a lot of time in scouring all of the available courses across their campus. And you can see the potential once we start rolling out things like the unified catalog. This will also allow students to identify course sections that may be offered elsewhere, that maybe were not available at their home institution. I'm very pleased to report that we did go live. It's a soft launch, meaning it is now available for students. However, most students have already registered for their fall courses, so we don't expect a lot of use of the tool at this point, but it will be ready in the fall semester for students for the upcoming spring term registration. So we have a lot of time to work out any of the kinks, but thus far, through our testing and initial feedback from students, this is proving to be very, very popular. So shifting gears from there to the bigger repaving Main Street project, I've shown this slide on several occasions before. Basically, we are going to take what we have with the repaving, or I'm sorry, the Main Street environment, re-engineer our student information system to really help us achieve the goals of unified accreditation, leveraging as much coding consistency as possible so that we can actually allow greater course portability across all of our universities for student access. We are also going to take an opportunity to create as much operational efficiency in our other ERP components like HR and finance so that we can actually be much more efficient and work smarter and be able to serve students much more effectively across the board. So this is a project that you approved. We have an initial budget of $16.8 million to work with. I expect that this will be a conversation with Ryan in terms of the earlier conversation about which dollars might be reabsorbed to help out with the budget stabilization. But we're working with this budget right now. Even though it doesn't show that we have much complete, we're still in the final stages of executing some contract with their implementation partner and things like that that I'll describe in just a second. But the real goals of repaving Main Street from a student perspective are to enable much more mobile-friendly access. We've talked about the new Main Street experience that is in place right now. This is a dynamic interface that the students can work with when they're going in, selecting their courses, paying their bills, getting their financial aid, all of that, enhancing self-service functionality and expanded automation across the board. We also know that we want to build this system to be responsive to student needs in terms of course offerings offered on other campuses that might plug into their degree program. This is to eliminate the barrier of a student who needs that one or two courses that just aren't offered in the term that they need it, and thereby delaying their graduation date. So we want to eliminate that. A key component of that is going to be the unified course catalog, and we're working very closely with Jeff St. John and his team on building out that functionality and mapping it so that it will plug directly into this new Main Street experience. And then there are going to be a ton of benefits on the operational efficiency side, particularly as that last item that I have noted on this slide is that we expect we're going to have a lot more automation, a lot more functionality, and much more performance, much greater in performance by leveraging cloud-enabled tools, particularly in our HR and finance spaces. So we are, you might recall the ERP assessment that we did. Highly recommend that we move our enterprise resource planning and performance management tools into the cloud, along with our human capital management or our HR modules. So some of the things that we know we'll be able to do in the cloud-based ERP space are things like financials, revenue management, invoice processing, better form management, making those electronic, getting away from paper routing and being able to take advantage of automation and approval processing right through the tool instead of relying on multiple systems that are tied together through a hodgepodge of different systems. On the HR side, we expect that our HR and benefits as well as payroll will be able to be managed much more effectively and efficiently in a cloud-enabled HR solution. We are also looking at onboarding and talent management as well as recruitment. And we had a great demo with a team from our implementation partner team and the HR folks and getting great confidence in what we will be able to pull off by making this move to the cloud for these tools. So this is the big picture of what it's going to take in order to get there. The most important aspect of this is that year one and year two, we're doing all of these implementations simultaneously so that they will be coordinated from a GL perspective, from a chart of accounts perspective, from a course coding perspective. We're going to be able to leverage all those and plan these out in a way that will allow us to move forward with unified accreditation support down in the blue portion there for our student information system overhaul. We expect at the end of year 5, we will achieve that unification that we're going to need to be able to make all of this work and make it as seamless as possible for our students. In terms of what's been completed, we did finalize our scope of work for our initial project discovery and validation phase with our implementation partner. We're doing some additional discovery sessions just to make sure everything's aligning with what our stakeholder offices are expecting. We are still evaluating the final bill of materials, if you will, the contract that we're hoping to execute very shortly, making sure that we're subscribing to the things we're going to need and not subscribing to the things that we're not going to take advantage of out of the gate. We expect that that implementation plan will involve all of the functional area offices, and we're going to be mapping out high-level milestones so that by the time I report on this project to you next is in a couple months, we'll be able to share exactly when we'll be going live with various modules after we go through that high-level implementation plan. In terms of upcoming, we have the Oracle or the contract with our final software partners that we're going to be hoping to be able to sign very shortly here. We are in the process of searching for and hiring subject matter experts that will help us to take advantage of these new tools and systems, as well as looking at different project teams that need to be formed along the way and chartered so that we can start work in earnest on building this out. So this is where we are with repaving Main Street. I'm excited. It's going to be a long journey. a marathon and not a sprint, but we are already making significant progress in helping folks see the future and envision what it's going to mean for us as we try to help transform the university through unified accreditation.
Great,
And that is
thank
my
you.
report.
Thank you. Great report. And I think just reminds us that infrastructure, we always think about buildings, and IT is a critical component there. So questions, comments, concerns? David, see what happens when we give you all the time that you need? It's so precise that there are no questions.
Oh,
Thank you.
Madam
People are
Chair,
hungry.
I did a question.
Thank you, Trustee Gates.
Trustee Cates, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. This is so exciting, and this is so student-centric, and I'm sure all of us are thinking back to the way things were done when we were at school, and this is very, very different. And it really does seem to have the student at the center of all of it. Can you give us an idea of where we are? Are we really a leader in this compared to our peers, or are other universities and other schools with whom we compete on similar tracks? Or is this something which, particularly once it's up and running, is going to give us a competitive advantage, do you think, in terms of attracting students to our campuses?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in two ways. We're behind in some areas and ahead in some areas. So let me start where we're behind. The HR and the finance areas that I described, those types of tools, automation, taking advantage of workflow, getting rid of paper, we're behind the curve on that. But we expect that with this 2-year accelerated timeframe that we're talking about to get those modules up and running, we'll be able to make significant impact and play catch up very quickly in those particular areas. On the student information side, I think we are thinking in a way that is innovative in terms of allowing better course portability, offering native credit opportunities for students across multiple institutions. Unified accreditation is the big lever that's helping us to move in that direction. And we have a prime opportunity through rethinking how we've coded and engineered our shared student information system to take advantage of that. Right now, the way the student information system is structured, it gets in the way rather than helps us achieve unified accreditation. So we're going to eliminate a lot of those barriers and rethink this from the ground up so that we are designing it with that notion in mind. That is going to be innovative. That is going to be trailblazing. It's going to allow us to tout greater opportunity to allow students to achieve their degree credentials on time and not run additional costs or incur additional costs because we were not able to offer the courses they need in order to graduate on time. So I would speculate we're ahead of the curve on that one.
Thanks.
Thanks. Any other questions? David, I think just the point that there are so many efficiencies in the work you're doing. It's clearly huge investment, but brings in efficiencies. The more we can track and concretize those efficiencies, I think the stronger we'll be. So as you keep that front and center, and I know some of it's not easily documented, but I think that's a really key priority for us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else?
I think Trustee McMahon has a question.
Oh, yep. Sorry, Trustee McMahon.
David, have we shared the sort of general progress we're making with the community college system? And are there any advantages to either party to working more closely on systems?
So I can tell you, I don't believe we've shared the repaving Main Street concept and updates with the community colleges specifically. However, I know that we worked very closely with the community colleges when we selected our learning management system. So there was alignment there. We are working with the community college system on our using a shared platform for our micro-credentialing. So there are lots of opportunities to build around those synergies that might inform how we be able to allow students to maybe take a community college course within our system. We haven't thought about it in those terms yet, and maybe vice versa, but we're gonna, once we've engineered the solution, it's gonna be much easier for us to build that pathway to create those synergies than we have today. But I think that's down the road a little bit. We have an awful lot of work just to get our universities sort of on the same page and using all the same codes, but we're gonna get there.
Okay. Great, thank you. Anybody else? Questions? Okay, thank you, David. Well, we have managed miraculously to complete our agenda. I would just, before we close, ask if anything that came up in today's agenda raises issues that the committee needs more information about, or issues that we might want to explore more in the future. Or if people would just like to end the meeting and be done until we meet again. I think it's the latter. Thank you all for your diligence in reading the materials. Thank you to the team for putting such great materials together. And again, goodbye, Chip. We'll miss you, but thank you, thank you, thank you. So we are done. Thank you all.